This short video is just talking you through the different forms of writing that AQA can ask you to produce in Section B of Language Paper 2. Now you'll remember that this paper is the non-fiction paper. So in Section A you will have had 2 extracts dealing with a topic, and Section B will be your chance to show what you can do with your own writing. The topics will generally be linked, so whatever you've written about in Section A, Section B will be related in some way. The task will be writing to argue, persuade, inform, explain. And it'll give you a brief, it'll give you a commission, an instruction that you have to follow to basically produce your own piece of writing. Now, thereafter, not only the quality of your argument, but also your technical accuracy. And for the purposes of this section of the paper, then technical accuracy also includes showing the right form, the right genre, and what conventions, what rules of that genre apply. So if you look at the range of forms that they say can be set, then there are 5 of them. Letter has been quite common. Article has been quite common. Text for a leaflet has never come up. Text for a speech has been quite common. Text for an essay has never come up. That doesn't mean to say that that text for a leaflet or an essay won't come up. It's really clearly stated that it could. But so far, the specimen papers and the exam papers have tended to favour a letter, an article, or a speech. So if you're having to prioritise your revision, then maybe concentrate on practising those 3 forms, making sure obviously you know what would be required for a leaflet, what would be required for an essay. So this section is really clear from AQA that we would typically expect students to replicate in exam conditions. So if they say they want you to write a letter in exam conditions, this is what they're expecting to see as a minimum. And when you consider that this qualification goes from 9 to 1, you want to be working above the minimum. But what you definitely need, if it says letter, is you need an indication that someone is sending the letter to somebody. So you must have a dear there, and we'll talk about the different forms or modes of address in a moment. But if it says letter, we're looking, is there a dear? Is there a recipient, someone receiving the letter? The next thing is there definitely should be paragraphs. Okay, paragraphs are really important in structuring your writing. Imagine how you'd feel if you were given something to read in school which was just a massive block of text that was lasting for a page or more. It would be overfacing, it would be overwhelming, and you'd think, that I don't know where this is going, there doesn't seem to be any kind of structure to it. So at the very minimum, you need somebody to write to and paragraphs showing the structure of what you're writing. Now this section is what you're going to be expected to include if we say letter. The use of addresses. Now this one's an interesting one because what I really don't want you doing is I really don't want you spending loads of time in the exam making up an address or thinking of an address. You need something to indicate that you've thought about the fact that there is an address there. So what you can do, if you think of the exam booklet here, you'll have your instructions, you will have space for a plan, so there's your plan, and we'll discuss that at a different time, but then you'll start your letter. And it might be that you do it on the same page, it might be that you take a new page. Let's just take a new page just for clarity. Okay, so a formal letter, and it's usually going to be a formal letter because They don't want you to be informal. They don't want to invite kind of email speak or text speak or anything like that. You will put your address in the top right-hand corner of the page. Okay, your address. Then, underneath that, you include the date. Okay? Below that, on the left-hand side of the page, you put their address. Okay? Then, underneath that, you put dear, and we'll talk about the different modes of address in a moment, and then you start writing your letter in your paragraphs. So, you, them, date, dear. Okay. Now, in an exam situation, you might not want to put your own address, okay? And that's perfectly understandable. If you can make an address up quickly, make one up quickly. If you just want to write my address, street, town, postcode, then do that. If you want to write underneath where their address goes, their address, street, town, postcode, do that, because all you're doing is you're giving an indicator of form, right? They're not going to check your address. They just want to know that you know one's needed and where it goes. So working down their bullet points again, use of address, we've done. Use of a date, it's in there, it's incorporated. A formal mode of address if required. Okay, and for a letter, there are two ways of dealing with it after that, dear. Right? If you don't know who you are writing to, say you're doing a letter to the editor of a newspaper, or if you're doing a letter to the local councillor and you don't know his or her name, there is a convention, that means there is a rule or an expectation, there is a convention that you can start dear sir or dear sirs. You might want to start dear sir or madam, and then you put a comma after it. You don't write dear editor, although I think that's creeping in. You don't write oi or you or anything like that. You're polite, okay? So it's the convention is dear sir, dear madam, dear sir or madam. You may decide that you're going to write to a job title, in which case, it might be dear head teacher. Personally, if I was writing to dear head teacher, I'd go with the dear sir or madam one, or I'd find out the head teacher's name. But it may be that the question seems to lend it to a job title, and you can do that. If you write to somebody who is not named, so you're writing to dear sir or madam, you sign off yours faithfully, and it's yours faithfully. Okay, capital Y, little f. You don't sign off best. You don't sign off best wishes. You don't sign off thanks. You don't sign off kind regards. You don't just sign your name. You sign off yours faithfully if you do not know the person's name. Okay, always capital Y, little f. You then write your name underneath. So, say, and you must write your name. Okay, don't just leave it, because that is the mode of signing off. You have to finish that yours faithfully with your name. They want to know who it's from, and you put that underneath yours faithfully, not at the side of it. So that's the formal mode of address if you don't know their name. If you do know their name, say you've been asked to write to the head teacher of your school, and let's say for argument that the head teacher is called Mrs. Bloggs. If you're putting Dear Mrs. Bloggs at the start of the letter, not forgetting the comma. Then you finish the letter, yours sincerely. And make sure you spell sincerely correctly. Make sure it's a capital Y and a little s. Okay? It's not kind regards, it's not best wishes, it's not best, it's not kindest regards, it's not thanks, it's not with greetings. It's name, then yours sincerely, and then your name. Again, underneath, not at the side, and that is the correct sign off. So just remember, if nothing else, dear sir, yours faithfully, dear named person, yours sincerely. Then moving to look at an article. What would you do if you got an article? Well, this tends to be an article for a newspaper or a website. So actually, not only are you trying to put your opinion across, but you're trying to attract attention by using a title. And you can see that even as a minimum, there should be a title. And it is much better if you can do something a bit fancy with the title. Think of a headline that just says a fact rather than a headline that's got a pun in it or a bit of alliteration or something in it. But at the very minimum, you need to show that articles have titles. If you can't think of a title straight away, leave a space for it under your plan and before you start writing, so you can come back to it as the last thing you do. You also need paragraphs for all the same reasons above. Once you're looking at more where you want to be, this more detailed and developed indicator of form, you're trying to do something fancy with the title. Try and make sure you've used, if not a pun, then some alliteration. Maybe something that is really punchy, really catchy, but there needs to be a title there. Sometimes you get straplines or subheadings. So if you think of a newspaper article, you might have your big headline title, you might have a little subtitle, and then you might have like a 2 lines in bold that are the real kind of focus of it, that is a kind of catchy quotation or something from the article. But those things again say that you're aware of the form. You know that you're writing a newspaper article or a web article, and you know what the ingredients are. Your introduction is going to be important, because this is where you're going to give your reader that flavour of what you're going to say. If you're writing an article, you want somebody to click onto that website, or you want somebody to pick up that paper or magazine and think, yeah, this article interests me. So you need that balance between doing the job in terms of effectively acting as a trailer and also keeping interest. There's nothing worse than an article that just says, in this article I am going to discuss. Okay. In class, we'll look at all sorts of techniques to open articles in strong ways, but be aware that really your introduction is your chance to pitch what you're about to say to your potential reading audience. You'll notice as a final thing there, the expectation of just paragraphs goes to effectively and fluently sequenced paragraphs. There is this idea that really the structure of those paragraphs is really helping build your argument. And it might be that you get repeated ideas, repeated first lines. It might be that you have a 1-sentence paragraph in there, but you're basically doing something meaningful with your paragraphs. We're going to skip over text for leaflet and essay just for a moment to concentrate first of all on this idea of a speech. And a speech has come up quite a bit. What they're after is basically a kind of script of what you would say if you were delivering that as a kind of generally impassioned plea or argument or appeal for someone to agree with you or to understand your point of view. So, in terms of the minimum they expect you to include, it's a simple address to an audience. There's got to be some acknowledgement within that piece of writing that you know that you are addressing an audience, that it's designed to be delivered. So it might be as simple as starting it as, dear ladies and gentlemen, or ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming, or ladies and gentlemen, we're here this evening, or we're here this afternoon to talk about the travesty that is. Something like that at its most basic. Same idea in terms of sections. Sections most easily shown by paragraphs, because when you're reading it, think of reading something as a script. It's much easier to know that you're about to change point or to develop something or to add on something if it's in paragraphs. So here, for sections, read paragraphs, and they're going to be developed in the same way as we talked about. Final address to an audience at its most basic is a thank you for coming, thank you for listening, thank you for your time. I implore you to leave today and act upon. Okay, just something that says, okay, you know that you are signing off in front of an audience now, that they have listened to you. The more developed and more detailed stuff we want, clear address to an audience involves not only opening, but maybe starting with a rhetorical question or an imagined scenario, or inviting them to consider something. So you know you're making that bond between you and the audience at that point. It might be when we come to look at persuasive writing, you can really develop the idea of using we or us or them to unite or divide. The idea of effective and fluently linked sections to indicate sequence says that you're going to know that a speech builds. Okay, it might be that you link ideas together. It might be that you're doing kind of signposting to say, I'm here to tell you 3 reasons why you need to give to charity, or I'm here to tell you 3 simple reasons why, or 3 compelling ideas that you can take away with you and act upon to persuade you that. Okay, and then you start firstly, or my second reason is, finally, or as my first point indicated, something that's signposting through that you've got those markers. That's a kind of basic way of doing it. In terms of getting more sophisticated with it, it might be you can play all sorts of games of building a kind of idea in, of coming back to it, of developing it, of building in a phrase that you're going to use as a refrain. Think about how politicians speak. Think about how anybody speaks when they're delivering a kind of impassioned speech. Once you're getting into more detail and developed, you need indicators that an audience is being addressed throughout. So not just kind of putting a ladies and gentlemen in at the start and the end, but that idea of acknowledging that there's an audience. So some of you here today may, or I can see that this may have hit home with some of you, or from the looks in your faces, this comes as a surprise. That kind of style that says, okay, this is meant to be delivered to an audience. I'm aware that I'm doing a speech all the way through. I haven't slipped into writing an essay, or I haven't slipped into writing a newspaper article. And again, that clear sign-off that I mentioned before, that idea of thank you for listening is at its most basic. Inviting your audience to go and do something, to act on something, to never think the same way again, to seize that life-changing opportunity as they leave the room, is a real kind of, a really more imaginative indicator. Speeches are good because you can judge your topic, and you can really have some fun with things that are going to sound good, like plosives and alliteration and some puns and things. We'll look at that in class, but don't be afraid of a speech. Just remember those indicators. Then just to finish up our final 2. Now, if you got a leaflet, again, you'd want a title. Same rules about making it eye-catching and kind of attention grabbing. Again, sections and paragraphs. If you picked up a leaflet and it was just a wall of text, you'd be a bit kind of overfazed by it. For a leaflet, it's showing imagination and what you can do, but remembering that you're being marked on your language. So a clear, apt is appropriate, or original title is great if you can pun, if you can use a kind of jazzy slogan, if you can use some alliteration or play on words, because it's showing your ability with language, it's showing your kind of imagination. You can use bullet points, but I'd say only do it once and 5 bullet points only, and just to show that you're acknowledging genre. Really, what's going to clinch it for you is what's in the paragraphs or what's in the section of your leaflets and how they link together, how they're logically presented or sequenced. So good subheadings, boxes or kind of puns or so might carry it for you if you can demonstrate that imagination. But really, it's going to be in your effective and fluently sequenced paragraphs. What you're not going to do is, if you imagine this is the exam box, okay, so you might have your plan there and your spider diagram or whatever. You're not just going to spend time drawing out a leaflet and then actually drawing a picture and then just making the rest of it bullet points, because at no point is that going to give you the ability to show off everything that's in the mark scheme. It's all about what you can do with language. Finally then, last thing is your essay. They haven't done this as yet, and I think it would overlap quite a lot with an article. Obviously you wouldn't need a title. You could put a title in if you wanted to. Essays have titles, but it would probably be formal. You'd need to put an introduction and a conclusion at the very least. So your introduction acting as a trailer, think of your introductions in your literature essays, and a conclusion rounding everything off, summing it up for the reasons above. This is why, I am determined to convince you that, etc., etc. Once you start getting to detailed and developed, it's the idea of effective and convincing. And we'll look at content in class, but you definitely need essay equals intro, conclusion. And again, it's paragraphing. That really matters. Okay. For an essay, really, it would be about showing off linguistically, so showing off to do with language, what you can do in the middle of it, the quality of your argument, the pizzazz, the flair, the style with which you're writing, as well as the quality of your ideas. Hopefully this has helped. What I expect to see in terms of annotation on your handout is some notes of things to remember, is some things highlighted, some things generally to show that you've listened to this. And if you could, make sure in the top corner you put your name, you put the date, and you put HWK to indicate you've done it at home. What I'd really like you to do to prove that you've listened to this video is on the back, in a very, very small way, just do a little asterisk on the bottom right-hand corner, and then I know that you listened all the way to the end. Okay, bye now.